So I'm Dave Flamini, and what I wanted to talk to you today is about some of the things, kind of from the farmer's perspective, on what they're going to need to deal with if they really want to engage in this farm to institution, farm to school sort of arena. Some of these things were mentioned, I guess, directly, somewhat indirectly, perhaps in the introductory remarks over in the keynote address. But I'm going to send you away today with a number of materials there that you picked up off the table. And I'm going to reference them here at some point while I'm presenting. I'll hold them up, and if you want, you can pull them out and look at them a little bit. But these are things for you to take home with you and study, I think, after today. What I'd like to do is get some slides up here that have some information on them, and then kind of engage with you in a conversation about some of these things. I don't want this to be me just delivering information to you. So I want some interaction. So some of the institutional markets that are out there. I mean, institutional markets, when you hear the word institution, what do you think of?
Yeah.
Jail. Okay. I've got it up there. Right? It's up there. But it's not a light word, is it? I mean, it implies something that's got a base to it, foundation. It's not just something that you take lightly. And I think as we get into this and talk about this a little bit, I think you begin to understand that when you're thinking about selling food into an institution, that kind of heavy thing out there in a way, that it requires some sophistication in order to do that properly. I'm not saying that it's something that's impossible, for sure, but there are certain challenges in it, and I think trying to find the right way to do it is really important, because we don't all have infinite amounts of time or resources to invest in something that may not work out because we made some mistakes along the way, right? We may try it once and then bail out. And I don't think we want that to happen. We want to achieve these goals of getting better food to our children in the schools, and to, when I think of the different institutional settings here, I have thought about this as like captive audiences. Your kids go to school, and if they don't carry their lunch with them, I've got 2 kids who are teenagers now. They've carried their lunch with them basically every day since they started school. But for those who don't, or who can't carry their lunch with them, that was put together by a caring parent or a well-informed parent who knows what good nutrition is and everything at home, they're really a captive audience. They need to be fed, and they're going to be fed by the school system through that setting there, and they really don't have a lot of choice necessarily outside of what is there brought to them. And I think we've come a long way in terms of, say, when I was in school. Maybe some of you who are around my age out there, you remember what came through the cafeteria? Depends on where you were. Did you have a cafeteria that provided, scratch-made lunches? Or was it something that was trucked in from miles away and warmed up and served to you, those sorts of things? So it's a mixed bag, but I think in all these settings we have a captive audience, and I think, and my philosophical stance on this is that when we have people like that who are in a setting where they don't have a lot of choice of their own, it's up to society and our other institutions to deliver something to them that's healthy and nutritious and good for the betterment of society overall. So these are a number of the markets that I see out there, and each one of them has, maybe some slightly different sets of opportunities for producers. Farm to school is probably the one we know the most about now, because we've been working at it the longest. I think I saw there on the slide this morning, I've never seen that kind of progression over timeline of when farm to school programs had started. It was like way back in like 1997 or something like that was the first few examples, up to where every state has something going on now, and it's penetrated and spread in the states to different degrees, but we know the most about schools. Daycare is something that came online, probably, I would imagine, is thinking about pre-K education and getting good nutrition there to those kids, kind of became as a natural next step on that. The healthcare facilities and what we're doing there. I mean, how many of you have spent any time in a hospital? Or have family or friends or loved ones that have spent time in a hospital? How many of you have had a wonderful culinary experience in a hospital? it gets better. I mean, it's gotten so much better in so many ways, but not for all. So we've had those experiences, we know what that's about. Nursing homes, similar situation. Prisons is one that is a tough one. And we can talk about that a little bit as well. I got a couple slides kind of dig into that as well. And then I think the natural extension of some of this is like corporate commissaries, other cafeteria situations where there's opportunities for farmers, and a lot of the same kind of requirements you have to go through up here to deal with schools, whatever else, kind of immediately qualifies you in a lot of ways, to prepares you from a business management perspective, perhaps, to avail yourself of some other opportunities in these, maybe the private sector and that sort of thing. So, did I miss anything? Are there other opportunities up there that you would consider to be institutional markets?
Oh, I just want to ask a question.
Okay.
If a person has land and they are interested in going to school, you say from farm to school, so what is the first thing that they would do?
Let me get into this presentation a little bit, and I think that'll become evident.
All right.
So,
I think you're going to put libraries up there now.
what's that?
Libraries are going to go.
Libraries, yes, and that was mentioned earlier today. And we're next. There's one across the street here, right? Like this street. And I can't hardly see from here, so I'm gonna get back here. So basically, a lot of this stuff was kind of talked about this morning, so I'm not going to go back over this. The farm to school really was the origin of this whole farm to institution kind of thing. One of the things that I'll point out real quick here, and I've got this one copy of this here, is that in South Carolina, I don't know if you noticed on that timeline there was something also kind of interesting. We weren't one of the earliest adopters of farm to school in the country. Matter of fact, we're kind of at the tail end of that. We were like, I don't know, 45th or something. We're in that last
2008.
2008.
Was the very first farm to school occurred in South Carolina.
Okay, but in terms of a statewide program, it was 2011.
10 or 11, yeah.
So I know Anderson County had an effort going on early on, and that kind of became, I guess, an example that a lot of other people began to look at and say, you know, what can we do? That's a great idea. Around the same time that was going on, I remember seeing a documentary on what was going on in France. I have a French wife, and so I was particularly interested in that. And I know that in Paris, some school system in Paris, they were spending 2 hours a day, which they spend a lot of time around the lunch hour in France, a lot more time than we do here. The kids had like an hour and a half lunch period, and they were actually doing culinary education and how to eat properly kind of education, everything right in the cafeteria, because it's such an important part of their culture, the whole food thing there. Not so much here. I think we kind of heard our keynote this morning say that this is really about a cultural shift that we need to make in terms of paying attention to what we're putting in our bodies and what it does to us and what it does more broadly to society. So there's some context and background on here, but I know that, and I was just getting involved with them at the time. There's a report right here from the South Carolina Food Policy Council. They had an event focused on farm to school and beyond. I think it was back in 2010 or 11. And this is a report that came out of all that. As I recall, it was out of that kind of gathering of folks and kind of exploring these interests that we decided we needed a statewide program in our state, like many of the other states had at the time. So, and this was mentioned earlier, we have all of these folks involved at the statewide level to support and nurture this. And I think the notes from the comments that came from Commissioner Weathers was, a year from now, what will we have achieved? And we've got a lot of things kind of going up at the state level, whatever. Some examples at the local level, and a lot of things going on. But what can we show at the end of the day? A year from now, 3 years from now, really depends upon the actions of farmers and food service workers and others working together to deliver on these things. So I'm going to focus my comments in on 3 different areas for farm to school, and we can talk about this, okay? So as I kind of went back and looked at some of the literature on this and kind of what the wisdom is around farm to school these days, these are the three areas, the 3 C's of farm to school that people are talking about. Provide healthy, locally sourced food products in the cafeteria, provide knowledge about farming to students in the classroom, and engaging the community. Kind of 3 domains of farm to school these days. So, and I think I say, how can you change the cafeteria in this slide? I think this implies change. And some of our speakers this morning were saying, cultural change, whatever. And it's because we're doing all this because we weren't satisfied with what the status quo was. We're talking about change. So what can we do to affect change in the cafeteria where we see, a lot of this kind of coming right down to the dinner plate? What can we do there? So we're talking here about what I would call direct sales to the institution that's going to deliver food from farmers to the school and get on those plates eventually. What can we do there? There's also what I'm calling indirect sales between the farmer. This is about the relationship between the farmer and the cafeteria, between the farmer and the school. What are some of those indirect sales opportunities? Okay.
How do you define indirect?
Well, so I think the direct sales, we're talking about, most people think about how do we get the food. The indirect sales might be, okay, I've established a relationship with the school. What other things of value can I sell to them? What do you see going on in agritourism? It's a relationship between a farmer and a school, for example. What's the most common thing you see?
Well, can I touch on that a little
Yeah.
bit? Because I'm the director and I buy a lot of stuff. And a lot of, we go through U.S. Food to get our local stuff, South Carolina grown. But say I want to make a relationship with the farmer itself, he needs to kind of come into the school and do some things for free, like taste tests to get to know the children or the administrators, and then or maybe adopt a garden project. You don't have to work it, but maybe his name's on it, adopt a garden, maybe give some seeds, cheap seeds, and work it that way where they get to know you. And a lot of times we can't buy a big box of, say, herbs, which we want to try to get some herbs into the school
Right.
menu. But through U.S. Food, either they don't have them, or if you go to the other, say, Sin Brothers, they give you a big box like this that goes bag. So if you can kind of start small and do some more, like you said, educational stuff,
Okay.
on the side, adopt a garden, some nutritional things in the cafeteria itself. I think that's the easiest way to get in, as opposed to, here's my card, this is what I'm selling, buy this.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, those are some excellent examples of what I want us to talk about today here, for sure. So coming directly from someone who's buying product. It's not just about what's in the box, right? I mean, you can take a product in from a broadline distributor, you can take it in directly from a farmer, and it may, to everyone in the cafeteria, the kids, the teachers, and what else, look the same, indistinguishable. A stalk of broccoli. Now, I think I could probably find the local one that was, look better, it's a little bluer, and
Right.
fresher. all
Right,
that.
some specialty items.
But you're carrying not just the product in there, you're carrying an image of yourself
Correct.
into the school system. And I think that's part of the secret sauce in all of this when people have made it work. And I got a couple of slides here in a little bit that will kind of highlight some of that. So I think you need to think about direct sales or indirect sales, and we can try to highlight some more of that stuff. You need to think about raw product versus value-added product. Is there some processing involved that you need to do to make it work? Or you think you can do, or are you going to try to is your strategy to be around just bringing raw product in or doing something else with it? You need to really think about what sells. What is going to, you don't want it to go on the plate and end up in the trash can, right? That doesn't do anyone any favors. We've got a food waste problem if we do that, right? If nothing else. You need to do something that's going to hit those plates and not stay on them very long to make it work. And so I think it needs to sell to the students for sure. but the school cafeteria personnel, what does it mean to have it sell to them? What's important?
User-friendly.
User-friendly for them. This can't be a big struggle for them, right? It's got to be pretty easy for them. Parents need to support this. I mean, schools pay attention to parents, at least they should, right? I think most of them do.
PTO.
PTO,
Farmer can meet with the PTO.
school improvement councils, all these different, things, and the parents themselves.
We have a wellness policy.
Okay.
Farmer will join that, so it's getting their name out there on all these things. I
Okay.
think that's the biggest thing. Well, I'm in a small town, so just getting you, everybody knows you, but they don't trust you unless they know you.
Okay.
So getting your name out
And if you think about what the goals are, we're trying to get better, healthier food to these kids, then having the parents reinforce the message at home is really important too. Administrators, they got to buy in, right? They got to like this idea, they got to support it, because they can kill something quick. If they don't like something, they can kill it quick. There might be others need to be sold, but definitely you got to be thinking about not just, it's a multidimensional kind of target audience you have for this market. So there's the objective I put on here, was to get your locally sourced product into the diet of all these people. My kids, elementary school, when they were there, always had kind of a separate lunch line for the teachers.
there.
What's going on there?
Yeah. The teachers,
Why is that?
they just don't want to be in with the kids.
There's the social part, they don't want to be the kids, but they're not serving the same food.
Right.
Exactly.
Exactly.
What's going on there? They're getting better food. So why aren't we serving something at the same standard for everyone?
Same thing with prisons.
Same thing there, getting better.
The warden's not eating what the inmates are.
Okay, so there's the cafeteria. We can think about that, get your juices flowing, start thinking about, if for those of you who are farmers or thinking about selling into this market, you should be thinking about, kind of how does this fit into my business game plan? How do I want to approach that cafeteria setting? But there's other opportunities. If you think about this farm to school thing as a multi-dimensional thing that's about the cafeteria, but it's also about that classroom and the community. So the classroom, what can be going on there? And you mentioned some of these things already. There's an absurd amount of ignorance about food production and preparation. Kids don't know, teachers probably don't know, right? Others in school, a lot of people my age or our age don't have this knowledge anymore. So there's an incredible amount of opportunity. You're in an educational setting, you can do some education about these things, right? And one of the things that's important there is to make sure that this lines up with these the curriculum standards that we have, so that teachers can engage with this as part of the classroom instruction, rather than being something that comes in and takes up their valuable, scarce teaching time. And make this part of the lesson plan, I think, is kind of a challenge, whatever you
See,
do.
that's the most important part, because even in my position, they're like, okay, you're the food service director. Through the state, you're supposedly do some training with the kids. But how do I tell administrators, I'm coming into your classroom, basically take over? They don't like that, or the teachers. They really don't, like you said, they don't have time for that.
Yeah.
So that's a big
So you've
challenge.
got to make it fit within those situations. So where does the learning take place? It's not just in the classroom, right? There's homework, there's field trips, there's school gardens, and parents need to learn too. What can the kids take home with them? Whenever my kids come home from school with some lesson, I usually pick up something out of that if I'm engaged in it, right? So there's all kinds of opportunities to reach the parents through the kids there too. So you as a farmer, what can you do in the classroom? I mean, this is your opportunity to establish a working relationship with the school if you're really motivated to do this work. So you can come in and give a talk, where it fits within the school setting. Provide a demonstration, tastings you talked about, the samples. Are there written materials that you can provide there somehow? And maybe, the organizations that are involved in supporting this can help supply a lot of those. They already have, they're on the tables out here, right? But what other ideas might you have about what can be done in the classroom?
Needs to be more money put toward the schools for this type of work to be done, because it sounds good theoretically, but a South Carolina farmer doesn't want to work for any less than anybody else. And they have to, if they provide the family, or if they're doing it for fun, or if they're doing it as a business and the way that their sole sustenance, they have to make money. And a lot of South Carolina product is as expensive or more because they may be farming 10, 15, 20 acres trying to compete with somebody in California or Florida that's farming 5,000 acres.
Right.
They have to have enough of a budget to be able to buy from somebody locally. And if there's no money there, it's all futile. And, they're constrained by budget. So it's a lot of constraints at the school district level, at the state level, I guess. And, it makes it hard for a South Carolina farmer to get in there and to be able to promote their items if the money's not even there to buy it.
So, and that goes back to some comments I'll make a little bit about, there's this concept in marketing called a loss leader. Anybody know what that is from some marketing class somewhere? Oftentimes, a grocery store will advertise something that is like really a great deal. You get a gallon of milk for $1. Okay, where do they put that gallon of milk? Clear in the back of the store, right? Because you got to walk past everything else to get to it. So yeah, you got a great deal of milk, but well, I picked up a few other things here, and maybe that's where the store's making their money, right? And that's the idea. So it could be that you need to make, as a farmer, it's all about intentionality and kind of what your long-range plan is. Do you have something? You go in and provide this, you spend a lot of time in the classroom, whatever, you build this relationship. Now, how do you take advantage of that for your own business? Are you establishing a longer-term business relationship that makes sense? If you can't see forward to that, if it's not possible, if you don't think that's going to happen, then I'd say you probably don't need to be doing it, right? It's great to build, unless that's coming not from what you want to do in terms of sustaining your business, but it's coming from more of a philanthropic kind of thing you're trying to do. You got to sort that out for yourself.
Okay, David, let me point out though that schools are tough, but some of these other institutions have bigger budgets.
Right.
So it might be that you can't provide the school, but it doesn't mean you can't work a deal with another institution.
Right. I buy from South Carolina farmers. I don't grow it anymore.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I know the constraints that they have and what they need to be. And it's tough on a South Carolina farmer. If there was an endless supply of money, it'd be no problem. But, when it gets down to the brass tacks, they don't have so much money to spend, and a lot of it's not allocated for South Carolina farmers.
That's right.
So a lot of problems.
So there might be some policy change in there that needs to happen. Yes, ma'am.
I think there's also a spin-off of exactly what he's saying, that there's also this belief system, I guess if you will, and there has to be value in your product. And unless that nutrition director is sometimes very specific to that district or that school or something along those lines, unless they see value in a South Carolina strawberry over a California strawberry, they're not willing to be so receptive to the local idea. And
Right.
also, like you said, it comes down to dimes and nickels or pennies. in a lot
So
of
you
cases.
need to go in and sort that out and figure that out pretty quickly, because you may be barking up the wrong tree.
Another piece of the puzzle to consider is the volume that the school needs to have, and the federal regulations that's on a school nutrition program. If we're creating a menu to be compliant with the program, we need at least 30 days that you can commit that you can sell X amount of strawberries. I need to be able to sell 10,000 servings of strawberries. And not every farm can commit to that. And then if the farm can't commit to that, then the school finds themselves in a place of non-compliance with the federal program. And then our revenues on the table.
Right. Yeah.
So that's a piece of the
There's a
puzzle
lot
to
of,
consider. Because
yeah.
I working in the school district, I haven't run across, I can honestly say, I've not come across anybody that doesn't want local. There's value in
Right, but
local.
the
We
question
all
is-
want local.
It may not have expressed itself into the policies that give them what they need to work with. They may individually want to do it, but they may be constrained by budget or what they think that students can or will pay, that sort of thing. Are you? is that
I think more limiting than that, because if you're in a district that is 80% free meals, then it's not budget for what's coming out of a student or a household's pocket. But the farmer has to be able to commit to producing a large volume.
Okay.
That's what she's saying in one part of South Carolina. If she says, we need 10,000 apples, and this farmer can produce 1,100, well, where's those other 9,000?
Because I've already, the state comes in, they expect apple on every plate.
Yeah.
So that's one problem. We have.
So working with aggregators and that sort of thing might be the way, rather than trying to approach this as an individual farmer.
I know that's how Anderson County dealt with that problem, because, that volume was an issue and it was hard to identify farms who could meet those volume requirements. But by working through a distributor, somebody to mediate that process, they were able, the distributor was equipped to make up whatever volume the farmer couldn't provide, from other sources. And that way the schools didn't get left short with what they were expecting as far as strawberries or apples or whatever it was.
So you can work with your mainline distributors, you can work with food hubs, you can work as a cooperative. It's not something we see a whole lot of in South Carolina, but farmers can form farmer-owned cooperatives and work together to deliver on these things if they can find others that are interested and have similar values and can find a way to work together. Right? There's options to do this, but a lot of times it does require, getting critical mass together. Yes, sir.
That's a big part of it, what you just said, the last part, helping farmers understand that to be in business in South Carolina, that you're gonna have to work together.
Yeah.
You're gonna have to coordinate together sometimes and feel those voids. And also, as the president of cooperative, that's kind of what we do, kind of help farmers coordinate their efforts to kind of go after larger opportunities, but also work with mainline distributors to fill those gaps, because oftentimes the farmers can't fill those gaps.
Yeah. So it takes a lot of cooperation and collaboration. So a farmer who grows tomatoes and they have another tomato producing farmer right next door, maybe at some level they see them as a competitor, they're a local farmer's market or whatever else, or for land, whatever else. But at some level they need to find a way to cooperate if they want to reach these other markets. And I think through that cooperation, and most likely, if they can find a way to cooperate, they'll probably get more of the margin out of that situation than if they all individually sell to some other anonymous market channel that didn't require the cooperation. So there's some payoff there, perhaps. Let me move on to this next idea about engaging the community, that third C. And some of this kind of gets out away from the production, delivery product or whatever. But it's part of, I think, probably building the foundation for all this to work. It's kind of out in the soft spaces all around it. But there's opportunities out there. If we've got mass ignorance in a lot of ways about food and agriculture and that sort of thing, then finding opportunities to kind of deal with some of those issues might be important. So, getting farmers to come out and speak at various community events about what they do, just trying to help inform the public about what they do and why it's important, that sort of thing. Oftentimes, if they don't feel comfortable doing this, my dad's a farmer, he would never do that. But he might do it if he did it along with someone else, So you got extension agents, you got people from, organizations out there that are willing to help you with these sorts of things. So, school-based farmers markets or CSAs is another idea that's out there. So CSA drop-off points somehow to school. Anybody know about any of those in South Carolina? We have any CSAs kind of operating, delivering, say, to the teachers and others? Not sure many schools. I'm not sure how they would approach that necessarily.
No,
Because you're letting the business in school.
I've seen the farmers markets in hospitals and large, corporate facilities.
Yeah, and it's easier there, I think.
Yeah.
There's some farmers that will have CSAs and the pickup points are in school parking lots, like when people are picking students up from school, but it's not necessarily There might be, but I don't know if one's
Or
there.
close to the school, maybe. or
Yeah.
something, yeah.
Across the street. Yeah.
I work Susan Lamb with the Middle School Alliance here in Columbia, and that autumn park creative buzz. We're doing an event October 9th that's gonna bring 23 farmers together with a whole lot of chefs and institutional folks. So, all these folks on the right are saying they wanna do local and do local. So we got the farmers together down at SN, and we're gonna say, all right, here we go. Oh,
Yeah.
they will be there.
So I threw out the subjective about what's this all about, engaging the community, trying to get the buzz going about this and get people talking about it, at least at some level. There's all kinds of things we're talking about out there these days in the public space or whatever, and this is one that I think we've seen a lot of talk about it, at least in some circles, the whole local food thing and whatever, a lot more interest in things like Food Network have really helped, I think, get people thinking about what they're eating at some level. So, any other ideas out there on engaging the community that I didn't list here? There's got to be 1,000 of them. Any great ideas?
I know in my community, I live in Pinehurst, and the local church down the street, they're bringing in a farmer to have a farmer's market after church. And I went, and his produce was very, very good, but expensive. And I have no problem with that. And I don't know if he's going to be able to make it because the people didn't buy very much. But most of the people after service did come and buy a few things. But
So-
that's one way. That's a start.
So maybe there's 1,000 small ways you can do this. It doesn't have to be one big grandiose way that takes a lot of resources, but 1,000 small ways. So, let me move on. Daycare facilities, another set of opportunities. I had 10 minutes. So there's smaller mouths, fewer mouths, right, than in the school system probably. I'm not sure, you add them all up, maybe not. There's smaller facilities, but I think there's probably a lot of them out there. I say there's more of them here. I see them scattered all over the place, right? When you got dual income folks and all that working everywhere, daycare facilities become part of the landscape. Typically lower barriers to entry. Smaller farmers can kind of match up with these a lot easier. Gap certification is something that typically is not required, as far as I know still. I'm not sure if there's a trend in that direction, it could be, but anyway. So here's what I think is important about this. These kids eventually are going to be in the schools. You get them used to eating good food when they're younger. They have an expectation they bring to the school with them, so do their parents. So it's a pretty interesting, from a strategic, broader kind of goal perspective of what we're trying to accomplish with all this. I think it's a pretty interesting strategic market. So something to think about. Healthcare facilities. I didn't put anything down here for this. What's it like to, what do you think the considerations are for healthcare facilities? For a small farm?
Certification, gap certification.
Yeah, gap certification,
Logistics.
logistics. Where are they buying from right now? They're buying from, the mainline distributors, right? So as those challenges of entering this market they're pretty high, and you typically will probably have to work through those mainline distributors. So you're in a wholesale selling environment when you do that.
Now, are you considering long-term care as part of healthcare facilities?
The whole mix.
Because I would see that as an exception. I think entree into a lot of long-term care facilities is going to be a lot easier
Might be a
than
little-
a hospital,
Yeah.
for instance.
Yeah.
I know with U.S. Food, if there was a particular farmer that I wanted who had a particular product, they would have to contact U.S. Food and I guess meet their standards.
Yeah.
And then I could buy from them with no problem.
Right. You could, the farmer would probably really rather have the direct contact with you because U.S. Foods doesn't work for free.
Yeah.
What about prisons? What do they look like?
So can I make one more comment?
Yes.
Long-term care is actually a place where it is a captive population, but it's a captive population of an opinion a lot of the time. And people who have good taste in food often, and so that is a good market to look into.
Very
And
good
people
point.
starving for good food, because usually the food is nasty.
Yeah, so if you go to visit someone in one of these places, you should bring a gift bag, right, at least.
Yeah, on that note, we saw a lot of nursing facilities, nursing homes, a lot. And all farmers have to do is come to us. They've got their GAP certification, good handling practices, and all their paperwork, we can back and say. A lot easier than they can pass it along personally. So give them a fair price and everybody can be happy.
What about prisons? What's that like, selling to?
Prisons typically want a lot of inferior foods, grade 2 vegetable and produce and different products because they're trying to really conserve costs.
Okay.
It depends on, I think, whether you're trying to feed the staff and administration or the general population. Because the budget for general population makes public schools, look generous by comparison, but they have a separate budget and different standards when they go to feed staff and
All your
administrators.
prisons fall under Department of Defense money, and that's all bid crazy money. So the cheapest man in is gonna get that bid.
Yeah.
So it's gonna be the.
That's a tough market for a small farmer, right? Maybe the second.
In South Carolina, DOD, that's it. No other place you can get it.
I
Okay.
would imagine that's probably a place where you could sell imperfect produce that wasn't that grade A, perfect shape, perfect size produce, maybe. One that's that ugly carrot or that tomato that's misshapen, versus, some markets just want that grade A, perfect shape.
Right.
Places like that may be a market for that.
Especially if they're doing some processing in-house or
Correct.
whatever, they can work with that stuff there. Now, some prisons, there's some programs out there where they've got some gardens going on, that sort of thing. It's part of the vocational rehab program. They're trying to teach, some prisoners to come out and be beginning farmers.
That way,
In
maybe
some
a way
cases,
to market yourself though.
Yeah.
Because you may not be able to get that high price or that premium price.
So this could be a kind of a mission-oriented market for some farmers to consider. No, there's some barriers to entry here that are pretty significant. So, what about the corporate commissaries? What do we know about them? Do they have money? I know they have money. I know there's people that are starting to make moves in this direction. And oftentimes, there's CSAs that they're kind of bringing in terms of delivering products, another way to complement that. And here I want to, at the tail end of this, I want to make sure that I point a couple things out here. So think about corporate commissaries, think about what that looks like. Think about any corporate installation you got around, where they've got a cafeteria situation. Not everyone eats there. It's just like school. People, a lot of times people will carry their own lunch in. But a lot of times people will eat there. Or they go out for lunch. They're not truly captive, right? Not like a lot of these other ones are. They typically have wheels and can get out and go to lunch somewhere if they want to. But a sizable number of people do eat there. So I threw a few considerations up here just to think about going into this, is that this engaging these often vulnerable captive audiences, the legal risk increases. What if you bring a foodborne illness into one of these situations? There's a lot of risk there. And one of the main considerations of the whole food supply chain, when you got people who are handling food in between distributors and others, they want to know who's going to bear the brunt of the risk, who's going to pay for the risk mitigation, who's going to buy the insurance and all that. And everyone has an interest in trying to get someone else to pay for that insurance, right? Or to take the measures required to reduce the risk. And so just keep that in mind, that when you start selling to the public, say through a direct market channel, a farmer's market or roadside stand or anything, that's one thing. You're already selling to the public and you got risk. But when you start getting into these situations where there's a chain of a supply chain as well, people are trying to shift risk around. That's what makes a lot of this stuff so complicated. All these increased expectations of product quality, uniformity, convenience, those sorts of things, we kind of talked about those today, they're there. So I think for these kind of markets, the individual producer is going to need to do some soul searching and thinking about their own assessment of their own business and kind of what their business goals are. If they want to get into these markets, there's opportunity there. But you're going to need to be probably a more sophisticated manager. You can't be lackadaisical about a number of things that you could be, perhaps if you're just kind of selling through the farmers markets and that sort of thing. It's a different type of business, probably a different kind of corporate culture within your own business and everything else. You have to pay attention to details. One of the other things in here, and this goes back to the farm to school, and maybe it extends to some of these other markets as well. You know, a lot of us get fixated on can I deliver my produce to the cafeteria, but there's a lot of other opportunity out there as well. And some of these indirect sales things I was mentioning before, you know, if you build up a reputation because the school gets to know you, whether you're supplying to the cafeteria directly or not, if you're going in and kind of working that community angle or whatever, then maybe there's opportunities here to build relationships so that you can do a pumpkin patch out on your farm and you can get those kids loaded up in the buses and coming out to your farm, and maybe that's how you make money. Maybe that's your business model. And it all started maybe with the farm to school connection, without you even selling anything into the school. Just selling yourself in a way.
Along those lines, that thought process, you know, schools are usually always looking for a healthy fundraiser.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you use your pumpkins as the school fundraiser.
Yeah.
And then it's not,
All kinds of opportunities there. Kind of adjust your thinking a little bit. Think about it maybe slightly differently. Think about what the goals of the customers are, what they're trying to achieve. Okay. What did I say here? Oh, creative approaches. This idea of maybe combining with the CSA. You know, if it's just a small amount you're trying to deliver into a school or whatever, it may not be worth the trip to you as a farmer to be doing that, to have all that complication just to sell a little dab of something. But if you could do that, and at the same time you're making CSA deliveries in a parking lot down the street to people who are somehow connected to school, whether it's staff or parents or whatever else, maybe you can make that work into your business model, things like that. So hybrid approaches and combinations of things might be required. This final line I want to make out here is that all of this, if you go back to the goals and you think about kind of what we're really trying to do with this, if we're really concerned about it, if a producer is concerned about the population they're trying to serve in these different settings, for whatever reason, and they're kind of thinking about that from a philanthropic perspective, and that's all fine and good. I think we need that in society. People need to care for each other. But if they're trying to build a business on that, and if they want to survive so they can continue to do that good work, then they need to make it work out so they're at least breaking even. They're meeting their own material needs. They're putting food on the table at home for their own family, that sort of thing, so that they can deliver long-term towards those other goals. There's a lot of folks that start with, the really philanthropic things, and they just kind of hope and trust that the business side's going to come along. But I would say they need to really pay close attention to that. Make sure that you've got the things in place to make it. It's gonna. You're gonna be around.
Do you have knowledge of stories that are success in regard to what we're talking about when we talk about profitability? Do you know of stories?
That's a very good comment you just made there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you the handouts that I had to pick up here real quick and tell you about what's in them. And one of those is this one right here. I don't personally have case studies from here in South Carolina of folks. Anna, I'm not sure if you all have case studies of folks that are working farm to school.
We have, if you go on our website, scfarmerinstitute.com, we have farmer profiles. And if you are a farmer and you'd like to be featured on our website, we have our table out here. Please sign up and we'd love to feature you. But Al Williams is a great example. He's a farmer and he does primarily collard greens. And he found a way to kind of process the collard greens and cut them up and deliver them to schools to kind of increase his, his capacity to sell and
So what's the
These are-
website?
It's scfarmtoinstitution, all one word.com.
These are some national level ones. I think the National Farm to School Coalition probably has some on their website as well. So there's some case studies out there starting to emerge and examples of people near and far. Definitely worth taking a look at for inspiration and a good example. I threw a few other things at you too. One of them is this choosing wholesale markets for local food products piece that myself and some colleagues put together a couple of years ago. Probably needs a little updating now. But this basically kind of lays out what you need to be thinking about as a producer to have your game plan ready, to be able to sell to wholesale markets, to be successful there. It's more about kind of there's a lot of like food safety considerations and all that, but there's also kind of thinking about marketing strategies and a whole host of things to make sure you're ready to sell there. There's one here. This came from a colleague who was on that piece actually at the University of Kentucky. You got that one there. And this is Mark. This is a checklist for farm to school business practice. This is kind of like boiled down, kind of what you need to go through is a checklist for your business plan, your strategy for selling into these markets to see if you kind of got things covered. And this comes out of the Market Ready program, which I've worked with here in the state and a number of folks in other states have. The thing that's really interesting, I think, in this is, we've got all these, kind of technical considerations and everything, but the thing that keeps coming to the top is here again, is communication and relationship building. The most important thing is that you have good communication with the people in the schools you're trying to sell to, that sort of thing. You got to do that so that you can work on the technical things, you can improve upon the technical things, you can know what those technical things are by having that relationship and communication, so you can figure it out together to some degree. So that's there. Anna, do I have I have 5 minutes still? What's that?
I sped you up a little bit.
Oh, okay. Well, I thought I had less time than that. I thought I was over. I've got a couple of things here on introduction to food safety and farm to school programs, and then a farm to school self-help form. It's another kind of checklist to go through to make sure you got your act together. Give you some pointers on what you should be doing to be successful in farm to school markets. Okay, I threw the South Carolina menu planning guidelines in here. How many of you are producers here, or selling into schools, or thinking about selling in schools? Okay, I think the reason I threw this in here is I think this might give you a perspective on what is it that the school food folks are thinking about in terms of what they need to put on the plate, in terms of the basic nutritional stuff, the elements they need to put on the plate. And so if you can look at this and see how you can help serve that market, help serve their needs, and help to facilitate the achievement of their goals, because this is what they're trying to do, then that can be helpful to you. And there's one other here, and I don't think, how many of you are producers in here that think you want to sell animal product to schools? Maybe, yeah. It's kind of rare. I think we're typically thinking produce. Some fruits, probably mainly vegetables in the state. Right, well, we got blueberries and apples, and we got some fruits and stuff there too. So I threw this in here. This is from the University of Maryland Extension, and this is where they are giving advice on selling farm-raised meats and poultry in a farm-to-hospital setting. Okay, to see what's involved in there. And so I'm not sure what kind of luck they've had with that there, but it's another market channel, another type of product that we don't typically think about perhaps selling in these environments.
We do have a few school districts that are doing that with
With
poultry.
poultry, okay. So anyway, I think there's a lot of different opportunities out there for different types of producers. I think in most cases, if you're a really small farmer, just getting started, especially whatever, you're probably going to have to find a way to work with others, whether that's distributors or whatever, or other farmers to get up to scale, to be successful in these markets. And I think you're going to have a pretty sophisticated, thought-through business plan to make this sort of thing happen. So, like I always tell the new beginning farmers in my program, you know, do you have a day job or a night job? So don't give it up yet, okay? You can be working on this, but don't give up that steady income somewhere in your family because there's some risk involved. Yes.
Just a reminder for any of the new farmers in here, Dave, we've got some of the program brochures as well.
Okay. So I do run a new beginning farmer program here in the state. Diana is here and she's the assistant director of the program. And so we've got some brochures here if any of you are interested in that. Our program starts in the fall and runs through the spring roughly. And we take applications in the spring. We're getting ready to start our new program this fall. We've already selected our class for this coming year. But there's a lot of other opportunities out there. We do regional workshops and other things around that you might be have an interest in. So if you're interested in that, I got them up front. You can come up and get them from me or Diana afterwards.
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
When you say small farmer, what's the minimum amount of acreage they would need? Or something like
Oh, you could have a really large farm on 1 acre,
that? Really?
right? Depends how intensively they're producing and what they're producing. You could have a fairly small food producing farmer. You could have a microcosmic food producing farmer on 1 million acres because they're producing feed for animals, not food for humans, right?
Yeah, human.
So it's all over the place. I mean, these definitions of what's small and whatever depends on what they're producing, who they're producing it for, how intensively they're producing their production methods. Like if it's a hydroponic operation or something like that that's much more intensive use of land, they can produce quite a bit of food on a fairly small amount of land. It can also be a really high value, like microgreens, high value crop. So when we get into dollar values of sales or something like that, as a definition, a few acres can be pretty sizable. But if we're producing a couple acres of just yellow squash in season, that's not really interesting.
Yeah.
So I'm not making fun of your question.
No,
I'm just saying it's all over the place.
See, but
So
that's the problem with trying to sell to schools as well, because there's that growing season near the end of the school, and then you have the winter with the
Right.
replanting, and then they have the menu which you're trying to sell. It
Right.
should be, the farmers should come to the school and say, look, this is what I have available during these months. Now can you menu?
and so preservation, storage, and those sorts of things come into play. Value-added processes can come into play as well. So you can hold that product and maybe process it into something that's more shelf stable or whatever for future consumption. Yeah. We okay?